All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Within Tolerance. This is episode 46, and we are joined with Sonny Hahn from Fulcrum Pro, which is a really interesting software ERP system. So I'm just going to start it off how we start every other guest off. So, Sonny, how did you get into manufacturing? And then we'll lead into kind of your company and your software.
Yeah, as a kid, I learned to code when I was a child. My mom was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. She taught me how to code. I made some video games, started building computers for friends, and uh, was really into math and nerdy things. But in college, I kind of had a revelation that I wanted to do something that would change something fundamental about how how our economy works, and decided to go into business, and specifically small business. So during the recession, 2007, 2008 is when I started my career, and over the course of 8 years, worked with roughly 350 different manufacturers, implementing ERP systems, helping them select them, customizing them, writing custom software on top of them. Yeah, met a lot of really great people, learned a lot about manufacturing, and just got a huge passion for it. It always bothered me how the system that we live in works, about how people don't really understand how the goods that they use and are surrounded by work. And I was always that weird, annoying guy talking about giant flanges being used by nuclear power plants, and how they're milled, and what kind of steel and what forges they come from. But that's the stuff that I really geek out on, is that, since the dawn of time, adding energy and expertise to materials to make them more useful is how we've grown to where we are now. And we seem to kind of lost a little bit of love for that. And I'm trying to rectify that in any way possible.
So to dive a little more deep, did you start out as your own consulting company, or did you start working with one of the bigger names or a reseller, or how did you? What was your first break into the industry?
I worked with a lot of bigger companies first. So most of my original experience was with Fortune 500 manufacturers. Here in Minnesota, there's a lot of manufacturing. We're close to companies like Caterpillar, Polaris is here, 3M. So there's a lot of opportunities to work inside that network. Got a little frustrated with how politics work in bigger businesses, and took some time off, took a couple weeks off, and worked for a friend's cabinet shop, helped them tune their operations. And they were so open to any sort of advice, any sort of ideas. They were a lot less meeting driven, a lot more experimental, and just do something and see if it works. And we changed that shop around. We went from losing $10,000 a month to making $40,000 a month in just 6 months, and of me working like weekends and a couple of really short spurts here and there. That, I think, was like the first hook, was the difference between bigger businesses and smaller businesses. That smaller businesses typically are much less political, much more results focused, and being able to see your ideas and your work turn into actual results and outcomes was really addictive. So that's where the commitment to continue to work with small businesses came from, and that was kind of the first experience in switching from bigger business consulting.
Gotcha. So I guess that gets into your company now, which is Fulcrum Pro. How did you go from consulting with all these companies and then bouncing around to some big manufacturers to deciding to write your own, or create a business around your own ERP?
That's a great question. I had a comfortable life. I had a few people that I was managing. I was very in control of my own schedule. I was well regarded in my company. The clients that I was working with were really happy with my work. And I had I had a friend in high school, early high school, when I was a freshman in high school. He was my best friend, and he died of carbon monoxide poisoning at Tomahawk Boy Scout camp. He was one of the only kids left over. He was helping close things down, and there was an accident, and there was no fault of his or anybody else's, and it was a really tragic moment. And I got a letter from his brother just out of the blue, and he basically just asked me, like, hey, we talked before at his funeral about where we would be, and I just wanted to know what you've done with your life, and if you think that he'd be proud of where you are. And I know this is probably a little too weird and soft and squishy, but that was really the moment I realized that all the passion and energy that I had to change something just wasn't there. I was comfortable and not really putting myself out there, not doing anything to really change the way that things worked. And took about 2 months to close everything up, and handed in my resignation and started the business basically 6 weeks after that. So yeah, that was the initial dive. I'd always been the person who would have a couple of scotches and talk some bullshit about how I was going to do this and do that, but that was kind of the wake up call to push me over the edge. So.
Well, that's great. So your company's called Fulcrum Pro. I guess let's get into, what do you do? We've hinted that it's an ERP, but what do you do as far as what modules do you have, all of that stuff, and then I guess before that, maybe like that seems like a very daunting task to just like close down and start blank slate. I mean, I'm sure as a code designer, that's a excellent place to start too, because you're not dealing with anybody's leftover terrible code. But how did you approach building something like that? I mean, looking at your website and looking at your software, it's not like, it doesn't look like something that was hashed together quickly. Like, this is very clearly a very well thought out program with lots of R&D into it. Like, where do you even start when you approach a task like that?
Well, thank you for that. We're really proud of what we do, but we also are always trying to push to make things better. But when I first started, we had just started building a house. We were living in my parents' basement. My wife was not happy with not having my income for an unforeseeable amount of time. But like you said, I knew the space was going to be really complicated. And I wanted to build something that wasn't just a tool, that would handle something that was really important. And so with my math background and all that implementation experience, what I realized was that there was a lot of really cool stuff going on with machine learning, with computational algorithms. And the key to unlocking that potential was having more data. And, I'm sure you guys know, in most shops, data is on paper. We call that dark data. It's not analyzable. You can't do anything with it, right? And if it's sitting there and it's sitting there for 2 weeks, maybe you have 4 operations in this particular routing, and it takes 2 weeks to get it all done. All that data is completely inaccessible for that time. Maybe you enter it in a week after it ships. Maybe you run a report a week after that. All of a sudden, 2 weeks have passed by, and you're looking in the rearview mirror and seeing that something went wrong, and you have no idea how to fix it. So I really took a lot of time to dig really deeply into the problem. I met a really great customer, Central Rubber. They're a rubber extruder. We built an entire ERP system on top of JobBoss, basically filling in the blanks. We built an entire custom ERP for a antenna manufacturer. We built an ERP platform end to end for a laser perforation company. And so we selected these companies that were in very different industries, had very different kind of structures to how they worked, because we wanted to make sure that whatever we built was going to be solving core problems. Like you said, not inheriting the baggage of systems that were invented in the past. And that was really painful. It took years. It took years for us to make the same mistakes that Epicor, that Dynamics made, and realize them and fix them and continue to do that research and development. And a lot of the times, the difficult thing for any human is to look at something you did that you're proud of and say, this isn't good enough, tear it apart, and start over again. And so what you see on our website, what you see if you use our application, is lots and lots of painful ripping apart and re-putting together until it's better. So that really is our method. We want to deploy a piece of software that doesn't take $500,000 to implement, that doesn't take 18 months, that you can use if you're a small business or if you're a bigger business, that has all the complicated gadgetry that you can deploy, that does auto scheduling really well, that helps you estimate your margins using complicated math. And it shouldn't feel like it's difficult. There is no reason why something that's good and complicated must feel difficult. And that really is a philosophy that we started on. We weren't confident. We couldn't really see any examples in the marketplace that did complicated things like this in manufacturing easy. But we saw other examples like Shopify and in other sectors where this type of work was done. We reached out to a few people, talked to people, got as many ideas as possible, and really started with an end user first mentality and built everything from there. So it's taken 5 years now to build the platform to where it is, but we're really proud of what we've accomplished in that time.
So, Sonny, let's back up a little bit. For those that are listening and that don't know what ERP is, talk a little bit about that. For example, myself and Dylan, we both are relatively small shops. He's got a partner. I'm just a one-man shop, couple machines. What could your software and system or ERP in general, how could that help us? How can that eliminate problems and, streamline our efficiencies?
Yeah, so the best way to think about an ERP is that it's a centralized data store that allows you to do really cool stuff because that data is centralized. If you imagine, we talk about this all the time. Our philosophy is that you don't need any software to run your shop. You could, no matter how big you are, with the right people, the right talent, paper, clipboard, spreadsheets, whiteboards, you could manage everything. But imagine if all that information was in one place. And imagine all the tasks that you could automate if that was the case. At its heart, that's what it's about. Is not entering things in multiple places, is having all the data available for everybody simultaneously, and it's for having a single source of truth so that whenever you reference it, you can get the same answers no matter who's asking the question. Those are kind of the first core principles of what an ERP is supposed to do. Now, there's a lot of different philosophies and different products and different things that are out there, but as a whole, that's how you should think about it if you're thinking about it for your company. For us, we focus on the guts of everything. We want to make sure that the actual selling, the actual making of the product, of the whatever widget that you're shipping out, whatever service that you're doing, the actual reporting on it and managing of the business, that's what we really focus on. So we start at quoting. Our quoting system really, we want you to feel like it's an extension of your brain. Like we imagine that everybody who's in quoting is looking at a spreadsheet, a drawing, something else on a different monitor, hopefully, maybe not, maybe in paper in front of you. And we want it to feel frictionless. We want you to be able to come up with a BOM and routing, associate those routing steps with the bill of materials, and do it with your keyboard and mouse in a graphical, beautiful way, and immediately see what the roll up of the cost and margin is, and have it tie into your real production data. Knowing, all right, maybe every single time that you run anything of this material type on this lathe, it's always 15% more than you expect. So whatever your standard operation times are, we're just going to add 15% to give you that buffer back. And so you're pricing things correctly. Maybe we want to know what our capacity is. Can this be, can it share a setup? Maybe it has half the same tooling as something else, and we can use that to combine it to get some edge and price it a little bit lower. Whatever that may be, we want to make sure that you're selling at market value and understand what the margin really is. And so that's really where everything starts. We keep all those quotes. We have them easily searchable. It isn't the type of search where you have to type in different fields and click and wait. You just start typing and it feels like Google. It just starts giving you results. You can convert that into a sales order. And for us, a sales order is all about planning who it's going to, who ordered it, what the due date is, where it's getting shipped to. Does it have a blanket order associated, multiple releases, multiple shipping destinations? And from that point in time, between the bill of materials and routing and the sales order and the shipping destinations, our purchasing engine can help suggest when you should buy stuff, what you have on the shelves that you can use, when the schedule should happen, what order you should do it in, and where it drops into the existing schedule. We have a job tracker that's not paper. It's a digital platform that can be deployed on any tablet. You enter the information directly in there. If a drawing updates on the sales order, it immediately appears. You don't have to worry about having old drawings. The data's live, so you can report on it live and see what's going on in your shop. You report the scrap and the quantities made. And by the time it gets to shipping, all that stuff is in there. We have an understanding of NCRs and CAPAs. of AS 9100 and ISO 9001 standards. We can help keep you compliant in that way. Shipping has integrations with many LTL companies and FedEx and UPS. And once that's shipped, we send an invoice out, and our system is kind of done. We have inventory interfaces that help you do stock take really well, all in one nice mobile interface. You just press a button, scan a barcode, whatever it may be. We can print barcodes, read barcodes, do stock adjustments, lot traceability, kind of everything that has to do with being a really cool and really well-run shop. We do all that. We don't do CRM. We don't tie into your email. We don't send email blast out. We don't do any of that functionality. And we don't provide you a P&L. We integrate with QuickBooks and Peachtree and SAP and almost all the software platforms out there for accounting. And we have a really great like receivables interface and payables interface and inventory value interface, but the actual general ledger and all that stuff we keep out of our system so we can focus on the manufacturing pieces. A bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that's pretty exhaustive.
No, I think that's. I mean, anybody who's listening to this who knows an ERP system, Job Boss, E2, whatever, those are exactly the kind of things that they would want to know. Is all the modules that you have, and so I guess that kind of leads into this question. You've definitely touched on this, but like, what does Fulcrum do that others don't? For some of our listeners who haven't used E2 or Job Boss, what sets you guys apart?
We want the new future technology to be something that is usable by smaller manufacturers. My experience with people that are using Job Boss and E2, you'd have to type a job number in. If you don't know it, to click a little search button, and that search gives you a whole list, and you have to search it and then find it, or you type it in and press tab. You have nowhere to go to kind of see all your data. If you want to report, you have to go into a report engine that uses Crystal reports. You got to go into the server to kick somebody off if they're logged in, but you need to use their seat. You have to kind of print out a ton of paper to put in the shop. Even if you use the mobile data collection or the workstation driver, you got to walk to a workstation and enter data, and there's only a certain number of fields that are there. We don't want that experience. That's not what technology is about. Technology, from when I was a kid, geeking out about everything, is being able to make you and everybody that you work with much more efficient. It's about doing more with less time. It isn't about automating people's jobs away. There's so much more work that we can do, that we can pull back from overseas if we're a little bit more efficient. That's really kind of the core philosophy that we have. We want it to be paperless. We want the data to be live. We want to give our users unlimited seats. Anybody that's in your business can come in the platform. We want the interfaces to be really beautiful and delightful. They should feel like really well-designed mobile applications. They should feel like really well-designed software in general. You have QuickBooks Online, you have Mint, you have all these things that you're used to, and yet ERP software looks like it was written in 1992 because it was. And so that might not seem like a big deal, but you've probably seen it. There are customers of ours that use Epicor, and the end users, the person who's entering in the scrap quantities, the feeling that they have is one where they cautiously approach their keyboard, they type a few keys in, they click a button, and they back away slightly because they don't want to disrupt it, they don't want it to fail, they don't want it to kick an error back at them. And that, to me, is just bad design. So from the ground up, we want you to feel safe. We want you to be able to find your information, put the right information in. We want everybody in the company to be in the system without generating more costs for our customers. And we want to do that in a paperless environment. All of that is to drive more data into the application, because the more data we have, the better schedule I can automate for you. The better I can tell you what your margins should be. The better I can tell you what your utilization should be. And those answers are the ones that help you make more widgets with the same amount of equipment, the same number of hours, and the same number of people, which is what it should be doing. It shouldn't be this cave of dread where you throw a bunch of papers in, and once in a while you send your least favorite employee to go in there, pull a bunch of papers together, and collate together a report, right? That shouldn't be the experience for anybody.
Yeah, no, I use Job Boss fairly frequently at my day job, and You are 100% right. When I was first starting to look at your software, that's one thing that really stood out is like, I can't stand using JobBoss because it just feels like I'm using a computer that I used when I grew up. It's slow and clunky and, like you said, designed in 92 because it was like it's terrible. Whereas yours looks like a modern day application. So I definitely appreciate that.
And it served a purpose before. It helped a lot of businesses and is still helping a lot of businesses. It's not as if it's a valueless system, but our software, if we don't continue to innovate it, continue to push out the best, newest features every single day, every week, every month, then ours will also be like that. The existence of JobBoss and Epicor is our daily reminder of what software as a service means. Oftentimes, software as a service is just, I'm going to collect money from you forever. But for us, software as a service means I want to provide to you the best software every month, the most stable, the coolest things, so there would be no reason you would ever want to use any other software. And that's really our design ethos and our R&D ethos as we continue to grow, is to not ever let any part of the application suffer out of laziness because people are fine with it. It's got to be awesome everywhere over time. So
Totally, and that applies to most of the manufacturing space. It just seems like it hasn't caught up to ERPs yet. I mean, if Autodesk made Fusion 360 look like AutoCAD, nobody would buy it. So
exactly.
it's, I think it's about time that somebody made something that looks nice in addition to being very usable. So I appreciate that. So, you've talked a lot about all the features you implement. Um, what does it cost for a shop to buy in or subscribe to Fulcrum Pro?
It really depends on your size and your complexity, but at the very low end, it's $500 a month. Setup fees are either nothing or maybe a couple $1,000s to get started. Really depends on how much help you need migrating your data. Our philosophy is that we don't want to be a service company. I was a consultant for a long time. I don't want that job anymore. And I don't want that to be a part of the deal shape. We have features that allow you to upload your own data, set everything up yourself, configure your own permissions and roles and everything. We try to make that process, even though you only do it once ever, we want to make that process really good as well. And the whole goal is that if you look across the entire ERP space for manufacturing, I think something like 65% of all the revenue towards ERP software goes towards implementation consultants. And so if we can eliminate that through automation, or at least reduce it significantly, that just means more value faster for our customers. There are large customers of ours that are paying $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. They're processing tons of dollars, or like hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue a year. So there's a huge wide range. Our software really, there isn't very much that our software can't do right now. So we have a big berth. But I would say that if you're a really small shop, we have a really great experience for those companies as well.
So for those small shops, let's say, just so we can stay kind of relatable to our audience, a couple people shops, maybe, I don't know, 5-10 machines max, how long does it take to set up something like that?
We have a customer that just started with us. He just started his business. He has 3 machines and he was up and running in a week.
Wow.
Which we worked really hard to automate everything for. He's live in the system now, running jobs through job tracking already. So again, he's not moving from another system, right? He's a brand new business, so there's a lot of baggage that he doesn't have, but 1 week, 4 business days.
That's amazing. So you've talked about how it's a cloud-based system. How much of the data is stored locally, and like what happens if I have a network outage? I know that there's this constant push to cloud-based stuff, and that really worries a lot of people in manufacturing. And I think those are usually the first big questions they ask is, how do I know that I have access to my data when I need it?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And it's one where there are customers that we've talked to that are literally in the middle of nowhere, Montana. There's not even cell reception out there, let alone good internet. Some of them are still on ISDN or some sort of dial-up. I think in those scenarios, frankly, we just wouldn't be a good fit. We want to store all the data for you on our cloud servers. Just eliminates maintenance for you. A lot of our customers go from paying an IT company a few $100 a month and buying a new server that's $6,000 every other year, to having none of that overhead, which is fantastic. We store some of the files locally on your computer as you open a page and you have a drawing up and things like that. Whatever's loaded is there. If there are certain restrictions, we have customers where all of their drawings and big files are stored locally, and our software can interface with it. We have to do a little bit of extra work to make sure we have the security permissions to do that. Typically speaking, you don't want your browser to be able to access your file system for security reasons. But like the philosophical argument is, internet access isn't getting less prevalent; it's getting more prevalent. Elon Musk is launching Starlink. You have your cell phone you can tether to it. Our software is well optimized enough that you need a very, very slow trickle of internet to access it and work the system. So I don't like to sugarcoat anything. Again, if you're somebody that doesn't have internet access, it is a non-starter. But even if your internet is weak, or you have a cell phone backup, or whatever it may be, or you just want to pull it up on your phone, because we're not a legacy architecture, you could use any browser device. You could use a tablet, you could use your phone, pull it up, log it in. You can get your work done through there. Which there are some advantages there that if you haven't worked like that, you probably don't have the context for. But there's some stuff that you gain too, along with the things that you do lose.
Okay, that makes sense. So we had a few listener questions. We posted it on Instagram. I guess the first one is actually a great one to start with. So Tangent Darts asked, when is the right time to start looking at an ERP? Is it, people based? Is it number of machines, a dollar value? Like, you've had so much experience with this in the past. When do you think is the right time to start looking at one?
I think the best answer is just whenever you start feeling like things are getting more chaotic than you want to handle, and that's the key, right? It's what that you want to handle. Maybe you could handle it, but for different businesses, it's very different, right? If you're a powder coater with customer supplied materials, you're not purchasing very much. You could handle, you could have 20 employees and have only 5 customers, and it would be pretty easy to handle that, right? One of the best businesses that I've ever met was a machine shop in the Boston area. They made pins for medical devices. They had 70% margins. They had 3 guys operating 12 machines, huge revenue, but didn't need any software. It was the exact 14 parts, and they just made a killing. Like, if I could engineer that for myself, I would probably not be in the software business. I just retire off of that. Not everybody can get those relationships, can do that type of work. So really, the answer, as much of a cop-out answer as it is it's when you start feeling like it's too chaotic to manage, or you feel like there's something you're missing, or you're lacking control. For most people that are manufacturing control, this podcast is called Within Tolerance. Like, accuracy, control, management, these are things that are second nature. So whenever that starts to feel like you don't have that control or power, you think that there is a more efficient way to operate and you just don't have the right tooling for it, that is the right time to start looking. Even if it's not the right time to buy, it is the right time to start looking.
Okay. And so I guess a follow-up question, you've touched on machine learning and automation and all of that. Mm-hmm. I feel like machine learning is kind of a buzzword. I'm not sure that everybody really understands what it actually is.
Yeah.
What does Fulcrum do to make my job easier? Like, what you talked about it backfeeding into your quoting system. As a small shop, like, let's say I'm a 2-person shop, Payton's a 1-person shop. What tasks is it going to take off my plate that I can just dedicate to the system?
So at a very small level, and just to explain the technology behind what everybody kind of bunches together in as artificial intelligence, most of these concepts have been around since the 1970s. These are mathematical conclusions to analyzing data to get good results that humans can't really find the answers to very quickly. We just simply haven't had the computing power or the engineering technology to put it all together and make it work. Specifically for manufacturing, machine learning is basically, if you had a infinite number of super smart math nerds analyzing every piece of data and correlating every piece of data with every other piece of data in your whole business. Even a 2-person shop has hundreds of billions of combinations of data. Machine learning is about doing all those calculations in the right way to find the right relationships and say, hey, if you do it this way, you're going to make more money if that's what you're optimizing for. If you do it that way, you're going to make less. And maybe we should steer you towards this direction versus that direction. Machine learning can't actually solve job shop scheduling. It has this spooky way of being able to tell you what the make span is. And make span is basically how long under optimal circumstances is going to take you to do all the work on your backlog. Machine learning can tell you that, but it can't tell you the order in which to do it and when to do it and what to schedule together, et cetera, et cetera. There's other algorithms and things that can be used to do that. But for a 2-3 person shop, the real answer is at that stage, you can solve your scheduling problems in your head on a scratch piece of paper. I operated a small machine shop for a few months, and that's what I did. I mean, it's embarrassing, but I just had like a notebook and I would look at all the jobs. I printed them out and put them on file folders, and I would sketch them out and look at the operation time, and my scheduling was done in 10 minutes, right? So there's nothing that we can do at that size that is that's better than what you can do by hand. Now, when you have 30 work centers, 15 work centers, 10 employees, 100 jobs, 200 jobs, now we can start to deliver answers that are really nice, that are 10%, 20% more efficient than a human could get to. But even at the low level, just imagine that you put data in once. You entered the quote once, you convert it. You don't have to type anything else in. You add some information about the sales order. It tells you this is what you have to purchase. You click a button, the purchase orders are done. Once it's purchased, we have a screen that says, here's everything you're supposed to be receiving. You receive it, take a picture, all the data's in there. When you start the job, all that information is in there. The picture of the material as it arrived is in there. You enter your quantities done, and all your paperwork is done. When you ship it off, you press a button, it automatically integrates with the shipping companies. You print a shipping label, pack list, bill of lading, all that just comes out. You put it in your packaging, you ship it off, you press one button, your invoice is done. So having the information in one place and just trusting that it'll be there when you need it just allows us to automate things that otherwise would have been open up QuickBooks, create an invoice, find the right customer, add the items, massage it a little bit, turn it into PDF, send it off. Look at all of the things, export it into a spreadsheet, take a look at what you need to purchase, make a few purchase orders, kind of juggle it around and figure out which vendors you want to buy from, and then make a purchase order, enter it into QuickBooks, receive it, and then receive the bill and put it in. Those tedious things seem kind of trivial, but they add up. And really, for the smaller shops, the outcome is you could stay a smaller shop and not hire that office person, not hire that next person and have 40, 50% more revenue before you kind of have to scale up to that stage. Whereas traditionally, you have to hire somebody, some help that eats away at your margins, it eats away at your break even. You just have this nice, comfortable zone where you can make a little bit more money and last a little bit longer before making that jump to go to the next level. So.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then we got another question from the Cogwheel, and he asks, what are your tips and advice on proper ERP project implementations? And then he says, many ERP projects are doomed to failure or end up as a hodgepodge solution similar to what projects was going to replace.
That's a great question. And it's a problem that's getting worse because in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, in our society, we did a lot more things that were joint. We got into a car and went to go see a movie, and we had to agree on the movie that we saw. Now we can stream whatever we want. We can play whatever games we want. We can play online on Xbox. We can play on our phone. We can cook. We can watch videos on cooking on YouTube. We can do whatever we want whenever we want. And the core goal of implementing a systematic software like an ERP is to get to a point in time where we all agree this is what we're doing. And the bigger the company, the more risk there is that politics will ruin it. And with anything that touches that much of your business, there's always going to be people that lose, and there's always going to be people that win in the short term. Everybody can win in the long term and after a little bit of adjustment. This isn't a zero-sum system. It isn't because I have something easier, it means your life is worse. But getting that commitment up front is oftentimes really difficult. We can do a lot of things by giving giving everybody in the business something. to look forward to. That's what our job is. But the job of our customer is to commit to it and say, we're going to get all the fundamental data in there to begin with. I think there's three big things that drive failure in ERP implementations. The first is just a lack of confidence. Sometimes you just have to have somebody say, look, I know you're a third of the way through changing all of your all of your items that were in keystroke, which is a really old inventory system, and putting it in a nested format so we can roll it all up. I know this is tedious. You're a third of the way through. Keep going. It's only another day or two worth of work. It'll be worth it. And oftentimes that in and of itself is really valuable, because imagine if you just quote unquote start off with your top 10% of items. And your theory is, well, as I get orders for these other items, I'll add them in at that point in time. Unfortunately, that never happens, and it never works out that way, right? That's how these hodgepodge solutions, like you said, happen, is that we have a hodgepodge commitment to getting the thing started as quickly in the right way. I think the second is that there is a lack of kind of understanding on how the whole business is connected. Before, if you just had spreadsheets, you just had your own little bubble to do whatever you wanted to, changing something didn't affect me, didn't affect you. Now, as we start using a system that is connected, there's a lot of value and benefit in there, but there's also a lot of potential controversy. It might now expose the fact that I do all my work at the end of the day. It might be that I do something wrong all the time. People can now see everything, and there's a resistance to it. So I would say number two is just making sure that everybody understands that no one's going to get in trouble. This isn't about firing people. This isn't about making people look bad. It's about making the company operate better. Getting people to really believe that and feel safe is really important to having a good implementation. And then lastly, making sure that you are the one that's deciding what processes in your business are important to keep and which ones are bad. The consultant that's implementing it, the software salesperson that's selling it, they can't possibly have, no matter how much they try, your full interest at heart. They can't understand your business. We train our people to ask a billion questions to the point where people get frustrated and annoyed. But our goal is to really understand as much as possible. And even then, we still miss stuff, right? And so I think it's important to let us be the experts in software, but also to recognize that you're the expert on your own business. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to change. It doesn't mean that your bad habits are ones that need to be kept. But it does mean that if you feel strongly about something, even if you end up being wrong, it's important to stand up for those things you believe in, because there's some pain. There's some customer that didn't pay you for 3 months. There's some rejected parts pain that is behind all those stories, right? Knowing that might not lead to the answer that you want, but might lead to a bunch of other things that this person that's helping you implement the software can just act as if they are you. So communicating those details, no matter how embarrassing they are, even if it's like, you know what, yeah, I actually stick all the checks that I get in a drawer, and when I need money, I go to the bank and deposit them. You know what, that is embarrassing. You probably shouldn't do that, but tell us, and at least we'll know, right? At least we'll know that that's the cadence in which checks come in, not to expect that you deposit them the same day. So I think that last piece is the most important. Really open and honest communication. I'm not here to judge you. None of my team is there to judge you. I hope there's nobody out there really judging people for doing things one way or the other. Our goal is to help you make more money as quickly as possible. And to do that, we need to know who you are. And if it's there, if I'm honest about whether I can do it or not, and you're honest about whether you can do it or not, we can do great things together. So long-winded answer, but I think that those are probably the top three reasons.
Awesome. Another question we had from Machinist Brett was, it seems like almost every cloud-based software has some lag to it. You know, click this button and it lags, click that button and you have to wait. How does your software minimize that?
Yeah, by better engineering. Just like certain parts are made better by certain people, certain pieces of software are engineered better by other people as well. We have really good talent. Our engineers are from Bloomberg, are from NASA. Our top 0.1% engineers. Our designers are really great. Our entire team is what we behave with our software, how you behave with your parts. We're looking at things, we're inspecting them. We want them to be shiny and pretty. We want them to be uniform. We want everything to work well. And we want our buttons to have under 200 to 300 millisecond response. That is the goal that Google has. And even still, if you go search something on Google, it'll tell you search 15 trillion something in like a tenth of a second or something like that, right? That if Google can do that with 10 trillion web pages, your ERP should be able to do that with 14 items in your database, right? Like that, that isn't a mathematical constraint. It's just bad engineering. And that doesn't mean that we don't have bad engineering in places, but we have it in very few places. Not because of any magic secret sauce. It's just attention to detail and dogfooding, which in the software world means using your own software. And this sounds silly, but we get together once a year, and last year we started a tradition where we act like a bunch of manufacturers that are working with each other. We make paper boxes, and our paper boxes look terrible. They're not made very well at all. But it allows us this kind of concept of, all right, this operation has to happen first, and here's some outsourced operations. So we role play as if we're working for a powder coater, for a 5-axis CNC machine shop, and for a laser cutting and brake press operator, and we have to put everything together. Like we do all that so that we know where, when you push a button, there's lag. And the only reason why in any software that would exist is that either the engineers never push the button, or they never push the button with real data, so it seems super fast because there's no data in the system, or it's not valuable enough for them to fix it. So there are companies who have been purchased by private equity funds that literally there's one software developer left on staff managing the bug reports for 5,000 customers. In that case, you got to have a little empathy for that guy. He's not catching up with button click lag. So that's probably out of the question. But there are other companies that kind of don't care, right? I think there was a study done in 2016 that showed that something like 70% of all manufacturers extremely dislike their ERP system. And yet those same populations still kept that system for an average of 7.1 years. So that says something, right? As a potentially gross software company, I can subject you guys to quite a bit of pain if I wanted to, and you'll still stay. So there might be some disincentive to do the right thing, but I think fundamentally it really is not to do with the internet or to do with how applications work. It's just an engineering question.
Okay. And so you were talking earlier about how you guys are pushing, new technologies and all that. What does the update cycle look like on Fulcrum? How do you guys bug test it? Do you have a beta test group, or like, is it all automated? How does that all work with you guys?
So we have everybody is sharing the same code base, but they're all separate. Some of our customers are ITAR compliant companies, so they have to keep their files separate. And when we push out an update, we do a rolling update. So we have a demo instance, and then we have a test instance. We deploy our code there. We do a little bit of testing. Then we roll it out to people as it affects them. So if we're just pushing out a new shipping interface that's going to change everything, we want to make sure that the first person to test it, the first customer, just gets it. They look at the interface, they freak out for a second, they're like, wow, I actually just understand how to use this new interface, even though it looks completely different. If that isn't the case, we're going to roll it back, redesign it until that is the case. That's how we ensure that the interfaces are intuitive, is that even if we go from a grid to a much more decorated grid, if you don't immediately understand the new thing, even though you're used to the old thing, we haven't designed the new thing well enough yet. So as we continue to go, we monitor that. We look at people. Are they even clicking that button anymore? Are they doing it outside of the system? So we're really paranoid, maybe a little creepy. We're analyzing all this data, but really we're trying to make sure that people are using it and it's bug free, and we're rolling it out in stages. So unlike some other software, our software doesn't kind of deploy to everybody simultaneously. We can select different clusters we deploy to and roll it out over time.
And then how often, nothing to hold you to, but how often do you usually see upgrades happening?
If machinist Brett calls me and says he clicked a button and it took a second, that change will be pushed out by the end of the week immediately. So there's different buckets of things. If it's a bug, performance improvement, polish, it doesn't look right on a mobile device or something, we're just going to push that out. No wait. If it's a new feature, we push those out. We try to have new features out once every month. And if it's a revision to a feature, a polish, that's typically every 6 weeks or something like that, usually on that cadence. So,
wow, that's impressive.
There's a lot to build. There's a ton more to do. We're gonna automatically suck data from your machines. We're gonna give your customers and your vendors automatic portals to be able to integrate with their QuickBooks so they can submit orders and keep all that synchronized. We're gonna have chat inside the application so that you can reference drawings and leave notes and talk to people. There's a bunch of really cool stuff to build still. So
that's awesome. So the last listener question we had was from Brandon over at Machine Shop Outlaw, and he said, "Is this or any other software a good replacement for parts and vendors?" And I'm not sure if you're familiar with parts and vendors. I know I wasn't. Had to kind of look it up.
If it's the one by Trilogy Software that I'm thinking of,
it is that one.
That's I haven't heard that for a long time.
I've never heard of it. So
it's an old system that was used by a lot of like prototyping labs in scientific institutions. I think Fermilabs used it, and a bunch of universities did. But yeah, I mean, our functionality is way wider than that. But we handle revisioning, multiple vendors per each different part, different BOMs that are nested on each other, that are subassemblies that exist as inventory items as well as components within items, and you can kind of expand the entire BOM. We handle all of that. So that's an easy yes for me.
Oh, awesome. And then I had a question looking at your website. So I'm a self-proclaimed quality nerd. I started at my day job as a quality personnel, and I still, program our CMMs and deal with a lot of the quality issues. Can we talk about your NC system and your Kappa system and what kind of data you can pull from it and all of that?
Yeah, we want to automate as much of the data collection as possible. So if I'm spawning off a non-conformance, I should know that you were job tracking this job for this customer with this material. My system knows where you purchased from, who you purchased from. So a lot of the kind of formality of tracking all that information just becomes very automated. We just pull all that information. You can edit it if you want to, but for me, my philosophical take on quality is pattern recognition, it's monitoring, and it's trend management. So you want to know if there's any hotspots, right? You want to know if it's always this material, always this vendor, always this machine, always this combination of those factors. That's a lot of where machine learning algorithms can come in, is to analyze a bunch of those sub-correlations to say, actually, every Monday afternoon, Sonny working on anodized aluminum on the 5-axis CNC always messes it up. Oh man, how did you know that he's sneaking back home to drink a half case of beer every Monday afternoon? Well, the machine told me that, right? So our core philosophy is we want to match with industry standards. We want to be compliant with them. But really, the more data you can collect, the easier you can collect it, the easier I can make it for you to put in what those tolerances should be, to give the operator a live feedback that, hey, this last part is getting dangerously close to tolerance. It's drifting. I can make a change to the way that the setup works or something like that. That in-process tracking is what it's typically called, or statistical process tracking. But really, it's giving live feedback to the operator so that we prevent mistakes from happening before they happen. And then over time, we're tracking all that information and running reports on that. So I also am like, I'm on Reddit all the time. There is a subreddit called Oddly Satisfied, and I always look for like the wire EDM GIFs where you can see the thing like flushly lining up, so it looks like a brick of metal, but when you pull it up, it's actually 5 different parts. I love that. I love seeing things that are really uniform, well machined. I think there's a sexiness to that draws people into manufacturing and machining, right? Like, I think everybody hopefully adheres to that and really gravitate towards it. I don't think that people like making bad parts. It's the times where they don't know or they can't tell or they could have predicted it but they didn't. Those are the places that we want to inject technology to help people. So I think ISO AS9100, fundamentally these systems are based off of processes and philosophies that were invented to help Japan in the 50s and 60s overcome their quality issues that were ported back here, bounce back and forth. There's a lot of kind of baggage and hand waving, and it sometimes seems like a wizard with a pointy hat reading a spell out of a book. But I think I think fundamentally, if we can remove as much friction as possible and get to the meat and potatoes of the data, our job is to track that data immediately, automatically, and associate it with your non-conformance reports, and then help you generate the correct corrective actions and preventative actions wherever possible. But fundamentally, the real quality changes that happen are providing the operator the data live in the job tracker.
Gotcha. So in your example, like, will if your system starts seeing these patterns, let's say you screw up every Monday for a month at this time, is it going to ping you, or are you going to have to run reports? Like, how does that?
It doesn't ping you yet. We are adding in text messaging support soon, so that might actually come. But right now, the primary methodology is we have a default heat map report that allows you to analyze any factor against any factor. And to us and to the people that have seen it, it's just the easiest way to scan across. Your eye can pick up anything that looks like an aberration. You can see if it was that day everybody was bad, or if that really is a kind of a sore spot for that person. And that's how we let people analyze it. And we default the report to the most variant combination of variables, and then you can kind of select however you want to slice and dice it after that.
Okay, awesome. And then you briefly touched on in-process inspection. Can you put in-process data into your system yet, or is that a future thing? Or
yeah, setting up checklists and tolerances and different checkpoints and pieces of data and units of measure in there. Those are all things that you put right into our job tracker, and it stores it. And if you need to print it out with the pack list, you indicate that on the item master, and it just prints all that stuff out or emails it. We have a company that we EDI automatically into their customer's ERP system. So yeah, we store that data and we pipe it to the places that it needs to be.
And you can run CPKs and all of that from the data too?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And your data is yours. So you don't need to buy any fancy packages. We can give it to you in Google Sheets, in Excel. You can play with it however you want to. Yeah, all your data is yours to play with and report on however you want to.
Wow, that's super impressive. That's like a million different software packages all rolled into one. This is an area I've been looking into quite a bit, so I'm impressed that you can do all of that through the quality. That's fantastic.
It's been tiring. I need to sleep at some point in time, but there's still more stuff to build. So.
And so for our listeners who are ITAR compliant, you guys can do an ITAR compliant install and all that as well?
Yeah, we can deploy on Amazon GovCloud and Azure Gov. Since Microsoft won the Department of Defense contract, everybody seems to be on Azure Gov. But yeah, we can deploy on a government secure ITAR compliant instance.
That's awesome. That really opens up the market for you guys. I know that's the hindrance to a lot of cloud-based software right now.
Yeah, and that should change. I don't think that's unique to us. I think Amazon, Google, Microsoft all have a lot of vested interest in making that as easy as possible for companies like us. So I would expect that in the next 10 years, it'll be easy for everybody to be ITAR compliant. So just from a global perspective, if you're an ITAR shop, I would not have any fear about that being an issue for very much longer, whether it's with AutoCAD or or any other software package.
Awesome. Well, I also wanted to plug. You guys have a great COVID-19 relief page on your website. So anybody who's still looking for more information, I know Tyler sent it to me, and you guys kind of lay it out a lot more clearly than a lot of websites. So anybody who's looking for more information, I mean, I think a lot of the loans are closed and stuff, but if you're still looking
Mhm.
for PPP or economic disaster loan information, they have a great little page on it on their website.
Yeah, and it was written kind of casually. It was like 3 in the morning. I was getting frustrated reading it myself, and I just tore it all apart and rewrote it in better words, I think. And there actually still is, I think, 150 billion more dollars in the second re-up of the PPP loan. So for anybody that has disruption to the revenue stream, I would certainly encourage you to continue to look into that. Have the documentation is pretty easy. Your accountant should be able to help you with it. And I would certainly prioritize any local banks. We have seen the most success even with local credit unions with our customers where they didn't have any previous banking relationship. Most local credit unions and community banks have been really, really generous about allowing people to have these loans processed through them without being a previous customer. So I think that there is any trick or any sort of inside tip, the best one would be community banks and credit unions. So
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. I know there's been a few people who have posted on Instagram and stuff about how they've been a customer of B of A for 20 years, for example, and they were denied because they didn't have a credit card with them or something like that. And so it seems like the local credit unions really have stepped up to kind of close that gap of people being able to get it.
And this is a terrible environment that we're in, but I'm jacked. I'm super excited. I think this is, if there is one big positive for manufacturing, is that these supply chain cracks and shards are completely exposed. There's a lot of attention on it. People know these buyers at big Fortune 500 manufacturers who are told never to shop around for new OEM manufacturers. They're shopping because they have to, and they know that there's risk there. So I think this is a great time to have knowledge and expertise in machining and manufacturing, as good of time as any in the last 15 years. So
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think that wraps up our questions. We always give our guests, some time to plug all your socials or plug your website or your business and anything that's coming out soon or new or anything like that. So the floor is yours.
yeah, I my email is sunny like the weather, sunny at fulcrumpro.com. Our our Twitter is Fulcrum HQ. Our Facebook is Fulcrum Pro. You can find us in any of those channels. Our website is fulcrumpro.com. I just like to say that if there's anybody that has any questions about manufacturing, about software, about technology, if there's anything that is bothering you that you feel uncertain about, I want to make sure that I'm contributing to this effort that you guys are doing, which is, to me, making information as accessible as possible. So if there's something that you might not want to ask publicly or you think that I might be able to help with, we as a whole company are committed to giving as much value, benefit, knowledge, assistance to this marketplace as possible. So our policy is email me. I'll try to respond within hours, if not within the same day. And anybody in our company will do so as well. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I know that ERP is kind of a like you said, it's a dark cave that a lot of people don't want to go into. So it's great to have somebody on with your breadth of experience that can kind of shed the light in there and show that there is companies looking forward and moving forward with that kind of stuff. So thank you for your time and thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me and letting me ramble for all this time.
It's our pleasure.